answered.
Welcome back to a massive Friday show. San Francisco tight end George Kittle, one game away from the Super Bowl. Here he is yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you dreamt about since you were a kid. Do you dream about it when you're in high school, college? You dream about it when you're in the NFL. You dream about situations like this, and whether it's a hunger, a starvation, a desperation, you do everything you can to make sure at the end of the game that you're going to win. You're going to win it.
Guess who's here? Super Bowl champion.
Good to see you, brother.
Coach
Good to be back.
How are you? Great to have you back. We'll start with Nick.
Sure.
Nick, how can San Francisco upset the Eagles on Sunday?
Well, I believe the Niners have an advantage at every spot except quarterback. I think that they have the better, and by the way, I think both these teams have great O-lines. I think the Niners is better. I think both these teams have, you know what, actually that one I take back. I think the Niners D-line against I said it wrong. The Niners D-line against the Eagles O-line, I give the advantage to the Niners.
But you think Philly has the best O-line?
Absolutely. And so, but I think the Niners can take advantage of every matchup. The one where the Eagles have an obvious decided edge is quarterback. So the question is, can Brock Purdy avoid what I would call his Case Keenum moment? That I was there for. Case Keenum was a backup quarterback, came in for the Vikings, went 11-3, didn't go undefeated, but also started more games, then won a playoff game on the Minneapolis Miracle, and then I went to that game. Dusty was there, our old co-host Chris Carter was there. We were in the Vikings booth. It was very weird because Dusty's an Eagles fan. He was pounding on the glass, rooting for the Vikings. The dude who owns rooting for the Eagles, the dude who owns the Vikings, but it was like a little awkward. And the Vikings jumped out to a 7-0 lead, Coach, and then it was a 38-point avalanche. The link was as loud as any stadium I've ever heard outside of Arrowhead, and this is what Case did. He was awful. I think the Niners don't need Brock Purdy to be great, but they need him to not turn into a pumpkin in his first road playoff game with the Super Bowl on the line in a hostile environment. And that's a tall order, flatly. I think that if he can just be adequate, the Niners' skill guys can win them the game. But you got to ask him to not turn into Case Keenum that day, and that's a big ask against this defense in that stadium.
It's interesting that you brought up Case Keenum. I thought you would have said his Jimmy Garoppolo moment, because that's really the reason they went after Trey Lance, right? Is their frustration in the playoffs with
you know what, Coach?
He missed an opportunity.
Yeah,
he's kicking himself now.
I'm kind of shocked that he,
you know what?
He let you off the hook. But that's a good point. And to me, there's three things that they really need to do. And I'd say the first thing is if Philly's going to run these quarterback-driven runs, then what San Francisco has to do is they've got to take care of the quarterback first. That's the first thing that you got to focus on, because if they're going to put him in harm's way, you got to take advantage of some of those things. That's why you pay left tackle so much money, is to protect the quarterback. And now you're talking about a quarterback who's been injured. Go ahead, let him hand the ball off to the running back. But any opportunity that you get to hit the quarterback, it's a little bit like body blows in boxing. It adds up, and it can affect him as the game goes on. The second thing is they need to dial up a little bit more pressure. And they're about 21%, 22% pressure, which puts them in the lower third of the league. It's not that they don't get pressure with their front four. They do, but they haven't really gotten much in the playoffs. They had 4 sacks over 2 games. Bosa has nothing, and the pressure can do 2 things. One, it'll affect Hurts, who hasn't been as good against pressure. The second thing is it can open up some things for those defensive linemen so you don't get the one-on-one matchups. And then the last thing is take the pressure off Purdy. Like you said, you don't want him to turn into a pumpkin, and you got to take it off literally, and that's through the running game, quick passes, max protection, stuff like that. And then it's figuratively too. You don't want him to have to go win the game, because he's gotten away with a lot of things from the football gods. Yep. I mean, last game, remember the throws the pick that does not a pick. Yep. That's happened a lot. He hasn't had a turnover. And you're right, if he turns into a pumpkin this game, that's an issue.
Well, look, speaking about Purdy, I don't think the pressure of the moment will get to him. I mean, he had to face Tom Brady. He had to play Miami when, Garoppolo got hurt. He's been good in the playoffs. But the pressure of the Eagles could get to him. I mean, the Eagles, I know San Francisco's got a good offensive line, but the Eagles, we know, have more sacks than any other team in the league by 15.
Yeah.
Right? So if they get pressure on Purdy, he hasn't been as good against pressure. He hasn't been horrible against pressure, but he hasn't been as good against pressure like most quarterbacks. So I think they got to keep him from pressuring Purdy. And then on the other side, they got to stop the run. They've been great against the run all year. Okay, now I know it's easier said than done, but look at this. When they've given up 100 yards or more 4 times, and they lost 3 of those games. And they gave up 99 to Chicago, and that was their another loss. So when they don't give up 100 yards rushing, you see they're almost undefeated. So obviously Philadelphia is a great run team. So to me, whose strength is not going to be a strength in this game, but they got to stop the run and then keep the pressure off Purdy.
Can I ask you a question about Brock Purdy? Because you know Upset Alert, right? The hottest segment in all sports television.
So hot.
I kept picking against the 49ers, and I was wrong, and I was wrong, and I was wrong. And I've been waiting for this Brock Purdy pumpkin moment. Yeah. But you were around Tom Brady, young Tom Brady. And at some point you realized that Tom Brady was special and it wasn't just scheme. Have you seen any of that with Brock Purdy? Like, man, it's not just all Kyle Shanahan. This kid is actually special.
Yeah, I see it in the way that he's handled the moment. I see it in the way that his teammates talk about him. I see it in his overall poise and approach. All those things are
you see it everywhere except for when you turn on the game film and you watch him play.
But wait a second. I've said this before. In that first Super Bowl run, 3 offensive touchdowns throughout the playoffs, and one was by Drew Bledsoe. But there were traits that we saw in Tom, and not being with Brock Purdy every day, you may not, I don't have as much awareness of it, but there's definitely things that you see that are like, okay, maybe they hit the football lottery.
Okay, there you go. Nick Sirianni, back with his NBA comparisons. Now, earlier this week, he compared Jalen to Jordan. He's back at it again, and he upped the stakes a little bit, saying, quote, this guy, Jalen Hurts, is obsessed with getting better. That was the common denominator of Kobe and Michael Jordan. Okay. How do I get better? He's obsessed with it. He's special. Now you're tiring of Sirianni.
Not of Jalen. Listen, Jalen, give him his flowers. I might be a skeptic of what he's going to do in this game, but I'm happy for Jalen's success. Enough of Sirianni. Enough. So, Coach, you'll like this. Sirianni got his start in the NFL. You might know this, you might not, but through a mutual friend of ours, because he went to the same YMCA as Todd Haley. And he befriended Todd, and when Todd got the head coaching job in Kansas City, he brought him on as quality control. And Todd, as much as I like the former Chiefs coach and a guy you worked with, Todd was a different type of cat as far as how he carried himself. And Sirianni's been doing the same stuff, and it's irritating. When they beat the Eagles, and he's MFing the fans, saying, that was for Frank Reich. Like, calm down. When he beat the Colts. It's like, calm down. And then this thing right here, during a playoff game against the Giants. What are you doing? Like
looking for the camera.
Looking for the camera to be like, oh, yeah, we're like that around here. Enough. It's enough. So and now he's like, Jalen Hurts. Is he Gandhi? Is he Jesus? Is he Jordan? Who knows? It's enough. I just had enough of him, Coach. That's all. I've just had enough.
Look, the happiest person should be Jalen Hurts' agent.
Oh,
because
yeah.
if you're going to compare him to those two players, then pay me like those two players.
Point.
If you're saying that I'm potentially one of the greatest of all time and making those comparisons, fantastic. Let's have a contract that represents that. I think it can be really unfair to players when you put that type of comparative pressure on them, and they don't live up to those unrealistic expectations. There's only a few guys like that for a reason, and now you put those unrealistic expectations on a young guy. It's hard. It makes it hard for him.
No, that's definitely true. Look, I don't hate this comparison as much as the last Jordan.
So many.
He's doing it like every week. Right. But this one, I see what he's saying. I mean, we know, obviously, Kobe and Mike were known for their work ethic. And Jalen, when you look at the improvement, I mean, what he did in the offseason was incredible. Yeah, we didn't think the guy could throw. And now he's a good passer. Mm-hmm. He improved in completion percentage, touchdowns, interceptions, yards per game, passer rating, yards per attempt, like everything across the board. Right. And so I get that comparison. But, Nick, I'm not as down on him as you. I hear you. The meme mugging, I mean, we can do without that. But, hey, Dable's rapping with his team after a win. Mike McCarthy's dancing for the team. I mean, I think coaches do this stuff.
And it also, do you remember the press conference when Jalen was hurt? And they're like,